So my name is Adam. I'm the student pastor here at Foundation. If I haven't met you yet, hello. If it's your first time here, you probably saw the sign on the way in. It says, "You belong here." And we mean that with all of our heart. You really do. We started this church a little over 2 years ago. And if it is your first time here, hey, we designed a church for people who have never been to church or have been out of church for a really long time. So if you feel like, hey, church isn't my thing, actually, this church was designed for you. So we really do genuinely mean it. You belong here. And if somebody has given you the vibe other than that this morning, would you come and tell me afterwards, and I'll go and kick them in the shin. All right, I'll just give them, better yet, you come and tell me, we'll kick them in the shin together. All right, both of us will go, we'll just kick them in the shin. If somebody said, hey, this is my seat, you can't sit here, they're lying. We don't have assigned seats. Actually, it's your seat more than it is theirs. Okay, they deserve a kick in the shin. We should start a shin kicking team. We should have sign-ups, and on the way out you can turn in names, and if they made you feel like you don't belong, 5 kicks in the shin. That's it. See, this is why I don't get to preach much. It hasn't even been 5 minutes, and we're already sign-ups for a shin kicking team will be in the back on the way out. Sign up for that. So for real, you belong here. We're finishing up our series called Grit, where we're looking at spiritual grit, spiritual toughness, right? What does it take to live a life of spiritual toughness? And ever since we started this series, I've been excited and embarrassed to share this story. I was in high school before I learned what grits, like what you eat, were actually made of, like the ingredients that were in grits. I was in high school, but I went to Waffle House one day. And I love Waffle House because it has one of the best deals in America, the All-Star Special. Come on. I went to Waffle House, but I decided I was going to be a heretic and get grits instead of hash browns. I know, don't judge me. I was just feeling grits that day. I probably went to Zaxby's afterwards instead of Chick-fil-A too. But anyways, so I went and got grits, and so they bring out the waffle, come on, the sausage, the eggs, all this stuff. And then I see her back there making the grits. She puts the butter in it, and it just hit me. I'm in high school. I didn't know what grits were made of. What ingredients goes in the actual grits. So she comes, and I was like, man, if anybody knows, this is the lady. she just whipped them up for me. We're at Waffle House. This lady's gonna know the ingredients of grits. So she comes. And she has this bowl, and she sits it down to me. And I was like, ma'am, I know this is kind of weird. What are grits made of? And as stern and as confident as she can be, she sets it down, and she says, grit. And then walks away as if I was just... So spiritual grit, our sermon this morning is very simple. If you want to have spiritual grit, be spiritual. Thanks for coming. No, I was kidding. But seriously, what is it? We've been looking at what it takes to have spiritual grit. The first week we talked about our grit score. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much toughness do you have? 1 being, hey, the drums were too loud, so now my parents are all in a wad when I go to church. And 10 being, hey, I've made up my mind that I'll give up everything for Jesus. You can throw me in prison, you can take my house, all those things. I'll give it all up for Jesus. The second week we talked about a big part of this is integrity. Not just what you do when no one's looking, but rather the decision that's going to change every part of your life. Right? If you make this decision, would it cost you everything for Jesus? And then we talked about humility. Today, we're going to wrap it all up and look at all of them together. I think our story does a good job at that of Daniel's life, where Daniel's grit score is tested, his integrity is tested, and this idea of pride and humility play a giant role in the story. We're in Daniel. Chapter 6 is where we're going to pick up. At this point in Daniel's life, Daniel is about 80 years old. The king at this point is King Darius. And so King Darius decides that he's going to appoint 120 different satraps or governors to go over the kingdom to govern different provinces of the kingdom. Over those 120 governors, there's 3 administrators. Just like, your corporate hierarchy. So there's the king, administrators, and then governors. And Daniel was appointed as one of the 3 administrators. But the cool thing is we see that the Bible tells us that Daniel distinguished himself with exceptional qualities that Darius wanted to kind of promote Daniel and put him over the entire kingdom. The problem with that is the rest of the governors and the rest of the administrators didn't like that because they wanted to get the promotion, right? They wanted to get the pay raise. They said, how come Daniel get it and I don't get it? So they come up with this plan. They say, how can we sabotage Daniel? We don't want Daniel to be in charge of us. But they knew that Daniel was a man of spiritual grit, that they weren't going to catch Daniel on some regular scandal, right? But if they were going to get him in trouble, it had to be about his God, because Daniel would not waver from worshiping God. So he said, hey, how can we pin his God up against what's right? And that's what we'll do. So they came up with a plan. We're going to pick it up in chapter 6, verse 6 in the book of Daniel. It says this. It says, may King Darius live forever. Now, here's the thing. So they go to the king, and they're talking like, oh, may the king live forever. But really, they're really not for the king in any way. Have you ever seen the movie Aladdin? All right, you know the guy Jafar that's in the movie? Like, he's supposed to be like the king's second-hand man, like there for the king, like ride or die, right-hand man. But rather, we see the whole movie as him. He's just trying to take over the kingdom, right? He's just like a snake in the grass, like good for nothing. So basically what happened, that's the picture I have, is like all these Jafars show up in King Darius's throne room, and they're like, may the king live forever, right? So that's our picture here. He says, your royal administrators and precepts and satraps and governors all agree, except for Daniel, all right, he wasn't a part of this. See the already line. All agree that the king should issue an edict and enforce a decree that anyone who prays to any god or human being during the next 30 days, except you, your majesty, shall be thrown into the lion's den. Now, your majesty, see how they're just pumping them up, right? Now, your majesty, issue the decree and put it in writing so that it cannot be altered in accordance to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be repealed. So, king feeling good, just got some compliments. What does he do? King Darius puts the decree in writing. There is our setting. They said, hey, where can we get King Darius like on our side? What's something we can do to maybe convince him? And they went right at him where he was vulnerable, his pride. Man, they really like gassed him up, right? They pumped him up. They're like, your majesty, you're so great. You're so wonderful. We have this brilliant idea about how glorious you are, right? And they said, listen, think about this for a second. They said, you should make it illegal for anyone to pray to any other human. Not only that, but to any other god. So they took him and said, you know what, let's elevate you above every man in existence and elevate you above every god. And they worship all kinds of crazy different gods at this point. But even to think if somebody like tried to elevate me over like other people, much less like a god, it would just be like super weird. Like I'd be like, that's just a weird compliment. I don't know how I feel about that. But here they're just pumping Darius up, right? And he's feeling good sitting on the throne. And he's like, yeah, I love it. Like, I don't know about you. I feel good if like somebody just compliments my hair for the day. You know what I mean? Like, it'll just make my day. Like, I don't need to be above any human or any god. Like, I'm just feeling good because my hair's looking good today. You know, I love it. You know, it's that feeling you get when you get new shoes. Right? It's that new shoe groove you get, right? I don't know about you. When I get new shoes, I'll create my whole wardrobe based off my shoes. Like the first time I get them, like I come out of the store, and the next day I'm like, what am I going to wear that's going to match these bad boys? And like, you'll start from the bottom up, right? It doesn't matter the shirt if it matches, and you walk with your feet out just a little in front of you, just a little bit more that day, you know? You got the new shoe groove going. Like, you just feel good, right? This is what happens. They were pumping them up. And instead of thinking about how his decision would affect others, instead of thinking about how it would affect his kingdom, how it would affect Daniel, none of that stuff, he's focused on himself. Not his kingdom, not Daniel, not other people. And his pride gives in. Here's the thing. Pride will cause problems in our life 100% of the time. 100% of the time, take it to the bank, it will cause problems. And I want to like sit on this topic of pride for a little bit and talk about it, but it's weird to like give a lesson on pride. It's kind of like preaching an oxymoron in a way, because here's the thing, stay with me. Who needs to hear like a lesson and what the Bible says about pride? Proud people. The problem is, if you're prideful, are you even going to listen? You know what I mean? Like, as soon as we start talking about pride, all the prideful people check out, be like, oh, that's not me. And then they start to debate on how humble each of them are. You know, like, oh, I don't need to listen about pride. I'm actually the most humble person in here. I got a t-shirt that says number 1 humility on it. And out of everybody, like, I'm the most humble. They gave me a trophy for it. Actually, I might stay, because if they need somebody to step in and teach, I could probably teach about humility. because that's just me. Like, I'm just like humble number one. And so I'll stick around if they got an extra microphone, right? You know what I mean? Like, when you start talking about, like, that's the thing, because they're proud, so they don't think about it. And I can joke about it, and if you thought to yourself, hey, I'm not proud, that's probably a good chance you might be. The reality is we can kind of joke, but God, when we read the Bible, pride is one of those things that God really, really hates. Let me just read like 4 verses really quick that talk about pride. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride goes before destruction. Isaiah 2:12, the Lord Almighty has a day in store for the proud. They will be humbled. James 4:6, God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. Proverbs 16:5, the Lord detests all of the proud at heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. It says, hey, people who have pride in them, the Lord detests. He says, hey, that makes me sick. And when I read these, I can't help but just sit and think to myself and say, God, I don't feel like I'm a prideful person. I hope I'm not. But if there's any pride in me when I read about your hate and how you detest and how you oppose and the proud people are on like the other side and you're like all those things, like God, if there's any pride in me, even if I don't know it, would you show it to me so I can get rid of it so I won't be detestful in your eyes? Can we all just be willing, just for a second, to entertain the idea that, hey, maybe there's some pride in me. Just maybe. Because if God detests it, like, we don't want it. And again, if you said, no, I don't want to entertain it, you're the problem, all right? Just saying. Can we all just sit there for a second? Because we want to make sure that we don't end up wrong in the eyes of God. And pride isn't just thinking, hey, I'm better than somebody else. Right? I think biblically, when we look at pride, we're designed as humans to give God glory. We're designed just to point people to Jesus, to honor God with our lives. Our lives to bring His glory. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And so as I live, I'm just going to bring Him glory. And anytime we take any attention, any honor, any praise, anything that belongs to God, God says, you know what? That's mine. That belongs to me. You can't have it. And then we get that's pride, right? So I'll put it this way. I have a flashlight here. And the thing about flashlights is when somebody has one, our eyes are naturally drawn to where it's pointing. So the next few minutes, you can look at me, but it might be kind of boring. I want you to look where the flashlight is. Like, we'll just take a look around the room here. There's some lights. Ooh, that light is out. That light's out. I'm just creating a maintenance list now for the school. That light's out. There's another one back there. Okay, so we have lights. There's vents. There's a balcony. Did y'all know there's a balcony back there? I wonder if there's seats. We could create like a VIP section on Sunday morning back there. Sell them for $20 a ticket. We can have like some popcorn and like some M&Ms up there. Okay, so shin kicking team is signed up. We'll also next Sunday bring $20. I'll let you up there. Maybe. Just see. All right, so there's some lights. There's a balcony. Wait a second. There's speakers. Why do we bring our own speakers if there's... It doesn't matter. It doesn't. So anyway, so you can point out. Here's the thing. A lot of times in life, like we have a flashlight. And what will happen is our whole job in life with our flashlight as we live, as everything we do, we're designed to do one thing, and it's to take this light and point it straight at Jesus. It's to point it straight at the cross of what Jesus did for us, what Jesus done. And hey, I'm nothing. Actually, I'm going to turn my back if you're going to point your flashlight at me, and I'm just going to point it straight back at Jesus. But sometimes in life, we have a tendency to let the light kind of point at ourselves. And we'll take just a little bit of the attention, a little bit of prideful thoughts, when rather everything we're supposed to do, we're supposed to take this light, not let it point at us like Darius said, but I'm just going to point it at Jesus over and over again. Don't point your light at me. I'm going to point it right here. That's pride, right? That is what we're called to do differently. That's what we're called to kind of push our light towards Jesus over and over and over again. And this is the thing. Darius fell into this trap of pride. So now here's Daniel, a man of spiritual grit, where it has become illegal by death to point his light at Jesus. So what does he do? We will pick it up in verse 10. It says, now when Daniel learned that the decree had been published, he went home to his upstairs room with the window open towards Jerusalem. 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God just as he had done before. Now Daniel, in that moment, could have very easily said, you know what? I could lose my job over this. Not only that, like I'm about to get promoted, you know what I mean? And it's just 30 days. And so I know I'm supposed to keep my light on, but for me right now, like I have to, like I got to eat. Like I got to have a paycheck. If I don't have a paycheck, I can't eat. So like how am I supposed to do this? And it's just 30 days, right? We tell ourselves, hey, it's just one signature. And then I'm done, and then I'll point it back at Jesus. But for this one time, God, if you just can't look really quick, that would be great. Like I'm just going to look away from this one decision at work. And when Jesus says, no. In all things that you do, I need you to keep your light on me. The question is, where in your life do you have a tendency to soak up the light instead of pointing it towards God? We joked about shoes and clothing, but maybe it is something where you like to get that attention. And you really find value when you buy things. And you find value when you look good and your makeup and your likes and your hairstyle and all those things. And when people give you that attention, like you soak it up and it's about me, you're not thinking about God. You're not thinking about anybody else in your life. But rather what we need to do is take this light and just point it and say, I'm just so thankful that God has given me a job and money to buy these things. And it's not really about me, man. I've just been blessed. Or at work with your abilities or talents, whatever it is, when you say, man, if they could just pick it up at work and get like me, like everything would be going smooth, rather than you're saying, you know what, I've been placed in a situation where God has designed us with different strengths, and mine's right here. So I'm just trying to use my life to bring God glory. Even in trials sometime, we have a tendency to soak up the attention. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with grieving. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with seeking help. Like, that's not it. But what will happen in trials is sometimes when we hear, like, people are like, man, how are you even making it through that? Like I see everything that's going on in your life. How are you making it through? You're like, well, I'm making it. You know, good thing it didn't happen to you because you might not be able to get through it like I am, but I'm going to do it. You know, and we'll begin to soak up, even in trials, we'll absorb the attention. We'll absorb it rather than pointing it back at the cross and just saying, you know, it's hard, but Jesus has given me strength through it. Have you ever met a proud parent? Like, boy, did you see that kid? If that was my kid, I would not let that happen. I've raised mine better than that. Let me tell you, did you see little Jimmy in the nursery today? It was, boy, if I was her parent, if I was that boy's parent, I would do X, Y, Z, and she just needs to get it together. My kids make straight A's. They've never made a B in their life because I'm just the best parent in the world. And if everybody else would just parent like me, this world wouldn't be in chaos. My kids are going to be the president, the vice president, like all these different things, rather than just saying, hey, you know what? I'm blessed that God has entrusted me with children, and I'm doing everything I can to teach them what it looks like, which is to point their light at Jesus. I mean, where do you struggle with absorbing the light? Because here's the thing. God opposes the proud. Now, you can guess what happens when those governors and the other administrators see Daniel upstairs praying, pouring his life at Jesus. They say, hey, we got him. So they run to King Darius and say, hey, you know, the law you just put in place, guess what? We just caught Daniel. He's praying to another god, and there's nothing that King Darius could do about it. So verse 16, it tells us, the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, rescue you. A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with the rings of his nobles, so that Daniel's situation may not be changed. And then the king returned to the palace. He spent the night without eating, without any entertainment being brought to him, and he could not sleep. Oftentimes, pride hurts those you love the most. Because when you're pointing your light at yourself, again, you not only forgot about God, but when we're prideful and we're pointing a light at ourselves, we forget about our wives. We forget about how it might affect our kids. We forget about how it might affect our friends, our family, our coworker. And then when we do that over and over and over again, the ones who are closest to us begin to suffer. And Darius learns this. He had to realize this. Remember, he plans to promote Daniel. He had things in store for Daniel. Daniel was close to him. He didn't plan to kill him, but his pride got in the way. So Daniel spends the night in the den. The next day comes. Verse 19. At the first light of dawn, the king got up and hurried to the lion's den. When he came near to the den, he called out to Daniel in an anguished voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continuously, been able to rescue you from the lions?" So here's Daniel, 80 years old, living a life of grit, where he's decided, hey, it doesn't matter what decision comes my way. I'm going to have integrity. I've already thought through this. I've already thought through the situations. Hey, if this happens or that happens, it doesn't matter. I'm going to keep my light pointed at Jesus. Even in moments when I could lose everything, even in those moments, I'm going to keep my light pointing at Jesus. He's living this life of grit, this awesome example of grit. But the thing is, the Bible never says if you live with grit, if you have this integrity, if you have this humility that we've been talking about and your mind is made up, all these things, the Bible never says that if we do that, then we'll receive the riches of this world. It does, however, kind of say the opposite. When Jesus was calling his disciples, people were asking, and he was telling them to count the costs. And he says, hey, if you want to follow me, you need to pick up your cross and follow me daily. This cross, this symbol of social outcast, of death. You know, if you were crucified on the cross, then socially, like you were disowned, your family disowned you, all these bad, negative things, you would lose your life from it. Jesus says, yep, that thing. Pick it up and follow me daily. John 15:8, Jesus reminds them, says, hey, if people hate you because of me, remember they hated me first. And I don't know about you, but I'm a very logical person. So this begs a giant, obvious question in my brain. If you're tracking with me, it's like, hey, live with grit, live with integrity, live with humility, live like Daniel. We can do it because if we do it, we're going to end up in a lion's den. Woo! You know, the question, like, if that's our outcome, if that's what's coming, if we live this life of grit, we're going to eventually, the big question is, why in the world would anybody live that way? Like, I'm logical. Like, you're telling me, hey, this is how we're supposed to live. You come, you sit, and you listen to how we're supposed to live, and then if we do all this, we end up in a lion's den. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Logically, so the question becomes, and hopefully I would imagine your question is the same as we're looking at this series, like, what is it? Why in the world would we get to a point where we're willing to live this life of grit? Daniel, servant of the living God, whom you serve continually, has he been able to rescue you from the lions? Verse 22. My God sent his angels, and he shut the mouth of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I done anything wrong before you. The king, overjoyed, gave orders to lift Daniel out of the den. And when Daniel was lifted from the den, no wounds were found on him, because he trusted in his God. Here's the thing, this is it. This is the moment when it's all wrapped up and packaged. It starts back when Daniel made his decision, and it comes to fulfillment here in this moment. Did you catch it? This is the moment where this life of grit makes sense and it becomes worth it. But it's also the moment over and over again where a lot of times people walk up and they decide that they're going to walk away. This is also the moment when they're studying Jesus or you're considering Jesus. It's the moment where people stand and say, nah, I don't believe it. Or no, it doesn't make sense. Or no, it's not worth it. It's almost like there's this battle. You know these scenes in Hollywood, like these old time battles, and they would line up and the enemy's on the other side, and there's this whole army, and they're standing at the line, and they're beating their chest, and they have their sword in hand, like the battle cry is about to say. Like they know the enemy's in front of them. They're ready. And when they say charge, it's like you go, nah, better yet, y'all got it. Go for it. Because for you, at this moment, when you look out, you're like, there's not enough there for me to step into the fight. There's not enough there for me to step in. Everybody says, hey, give your life to Jesus, commit everything, get to where, even if it costs you everything, commit your life to Jesus, jump into the fight, and you stand there and you say, I don't know. I've met a lot of people who live life like right on the line. Like they'll stay in their armor and they'll come to church and they'll like believe in Jesus. But every time it comes time to fight, they're just like, you know what? I just like to hear other people's stories of battle. And I don't know about me fighting yet. Like I'm just going to be a hype man. You know, it's just like, are you ready? Yeah, and y'all can do it. Go. Woohoo. Come on back and let me hear about your stories, right? And so the question becomes like, what is the difference? If we look around and we see all these people who stand at this line and run and fight in the battle, with Daniel's life, with those of us who has given everything to Jesus, the question you might be asking is, what is the difference between Daniel and y'all and me when I can't go into fight? I've walked to the line a couple of times, but I'm not willing to go and fight. What's the difference? Are you ready? Here it is. We see this in Daniel's life. We see this in ours. This is it. Because like Daniel, we understand that there's more to life than what happens on this earth. We understand that this life is temporary. Death is inevitable. It is coming. And this is like the most happy, sad thing I could say. I know that's an oxymoron. But when I think about this, like death is coming. If you've ever been to a graveyard and stood and looked and seen all of the hundreds of graves, and you understand that there's a body underneath every single one of those tombstones, this overwhelming feeling that death is inevitable comes over you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's coming. If you or a loved one has ever got the news that they have cancer, this overwhelming sense that, hey, there's nothing I can do about death, and it's coming. It hits us. It's inside of us. It doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit right. It makes us sad. But on the flip side, we can have joy in this because we hear about a guy named Jesus who came and died on the cross for each of us. And when he did that, he bridged the gap between heaven and hell. And he says, hey, if you live for me, if you can commit your entire life to me, then I have the keys to eternity in my hands. And we'll fight together through life. And you can see life through eternity because what happens here on earth is so temporary. And because of Jesus, when we have our swords in our hands and we step to this battle line and we see all the crazy lions in front of us, we see all the struggles in front of us, we see the battles in front of us, and it says, hey, it's time to fight, we can look and say, you know what? There's so many things in this world, but at the same time, they're just temporary. They really don't mean too much because I have my view on eternity. I have my view on this life that hasn't even came yet, that Jesus promised he's coming back to create. And you can take my job. You can take my house. You can take all these things because my life is on eternity. And I'm willing and ready to jump in. Because if you're just focused on like life and things of this world, and you're just focused on that lion that's right in front of you, you'll always stay missing the point. I lived in Kentucky for a little while. For 3 years, actually. And it was while I was in Kentucky that I began to learn a lot about horses, right? Like in Kentucky, there's only two things to talk about. It's horses and UK basketball. That's all they want to talk about. Don't talk about NCAA football. They don't want nothing to do with that. But UK basketball, they'll talk about it. All right, that's it. And so, like, I knew a little bit about horses, but not a ton. But, you know, it's just culturally, I'm just in the conversations. And so one of the things that I knew, but I learned that just made more sense to me about horses, no matter whether it's horse races or they're pulling carriages, you might have noticed horses 90% of the time when they're dealing with humans have on blinders. Now, if you don't know what a blinder is, it's kind of like it'll either be a piece of leather or like a whole hood that goes over the horse. And it comes out over the sides of their eyes, and it keeps them from seeing what's beside them or specifically what's behind them. Like everybody knows not approach the horse from the rear because they're skittish and they'll kick you right in the chest, you know? And so what it is and they're skittish from the side too. So the blinders help them stay focused on wherever they're going, whatever their task is. Like even like a tree blowing in the wind to their side would make a horse kind of skittish. So they keep these blinders on them so that way they can stay focused on what's in front of them. Here's the problem with us. Too many of us, Satan has put on blinders in our lives. And we sit, and when we look forward, all we see are the lions that are in front of us. And we see these lions, and we get focused on them. And even when we get rid of one, there's another lion, and we're just sitting, walking around like this, looking at the trials and the problems and all the negative things in our life. And when we look at it, we stand in this line and say, you know what? It's not worth it. It's not worth going in the fight for Jesus. It's not worth giving everything to Jesus for me. It doesn't make sense. And God is saying, look, if you would take your blinders off, you would realize that the fight has already been won. And that what happens in this world really doesn't matter because there is an eternity in store. And the only thing that matters is that. And so if you would take your blinders off, you would realize this one very important truth. When you feel like you're surrounded by lions, remember, God already has the lions surrounded. And when you feel like you're about to go in this fight and it's not worth it, would you take your blinders off and realize that God is there, God is present, eternity is in store. And while we want to hold on to the things of this world, while promotion seems so important, while money seems so important, while our looks seem so important, if we would take our blinders off and realize that eternity is in front of us. And instead of taking this light and pointing it at us and focusing, if we just point it towards Jesus, when we rally at this line together, we'll step in the battle knowing that, hey, this battle is already won. Jesus is already with us. He's already done it. Fathers, would you step to this battle line and lead your family on what it looks like that, hey, there's things in this world and I'm going to take care of us, I'm going to provide for us, but none of those are more important than my life that Jesus has called me to. And son, let me show you that there's lions in front of me, but when we step to this battle line, we're going to go together because take your blinders off, son. Jesus has already surrounded these lions. Mothers, would you walk up to the line with your children and show them what it looks like to live a life for Jesus with reckless abandon that, hey, there's things in this world that are important that we have to do, but if we set our life on eternity, God's already with us. Grandmothers, grandparents, Daniel was 80 years old when this happened. And I feel like so many times Satan puts blinders on and says, you know what? You just need to coast this out. Retirement's almost here. Keep on saving. Figure this out. And God's saying, would you take your blinders off? It might look like there's a lion in front of you and there's something going on, but Jesus is saying, look, it's already done. Forget about the things of this world. Man, we've got to step into the fight. Jesus already has those lions surrounded. And I love that each week we end the same way. When we gather together, we always end by taking communion, by remembering the death and the resurrection of Jesus. And I love it because it helps us frame this battle. It helps us frame this fight. We like to say it helps us frame the week in front of us. And so you'll see people, they just got out of the aisles and they'll walk up and they'll return here in a moment, and on that is going to be a tray. And on that tray, there's going to be two things. There's going to be a little cracker and a little cup of juice. And for those of us who have made that decision, hey, I got my sword in my hand, and when that fight comes, that horn blows, I'm stepping in the battle, it reminds us what Jesus has done for us to make it possible, to make eternity possible. And so the little cracker represents his body, and the little cup represents his blood that was shed for us. And so we do this every week where we take communion and we just stop and we remember like, hey, it's through the cross, it's through the death and the resurrection of Jesus that we go and fight. And I love it because just like there's this imagery, this picture that we can all imagine of this battle line, there's also this picture that happens the night before battle when the army gets together and they eat together one final time. You know what I mean? Like there's this big table and there's candles on it, and they're excited that they're with the people that they're going to war with, their family, and they're having this meal together one final time, knowing that, hey, we're about to go into battle. Here's the thing, when your shadow darkens the doors of this auditorium, Satan is going to try to put your blinders on, show you the lion, and we're going to take them off and say, hey, I'm willing and ready to give everything to Jesus and fight. It's almost like we're taking a meal together the night before our battle. So as we commune with Jesus, as we remember Jesus, the death and the resurrection, may we not forget the power that he gives us as we go to fight.